creating all the getters and setters and the two strings and the constructors, but I do have a couple of constructors I want to create outside of it and talk a little bit more in depth about them. But just a quick thing. So all of your data objects are going to have some kind of instance variables. If they're private, you're going to have getters and setters and a toString. There's not going to be a lot of functionality in your data objects. They're really just going to store data. So like location is really going to just hold city and state. Now, with that being said, I can go ahead and create a constructor because you really don't have a location unless you have a city and state. So we'll go ahead and let Eclipse create that constructor for us. But what's going to happen here, it's actually going to break something. So there's that constructor. Let me go ahead and label that constructor. And as soon as I save that, we're going to see that we have a problem because we are using constructor as a composition piece within another class. So location now has a constructor that requires two pieces of information. And again, I would never make a location unless I had a city and state. I wouldn't make a location when it's empty because that wouldn't be worth anything. So I do need to have a location that has a city and state. And this is only going to be specific to the US because we probably have country and stuff like that. But because that constructor now requires two pieces of information, I cannot now just go ahead and make a location without passing it information. So over in my hotel class, which requires that it has a relationship with a location here, I can't just do that piece of it. So I'm going to now take this piece out of here and I'm going to declare my local variable, but I'm not going to actually do anything with it. So I can make that location at any point. Well, I'm going to have to make it pretty quick here. So uh, when I declare a variable at the class level, it's going to create a default object of that type. Now I can't create a default local variable because I have a requirement that location has some pieces of information, but I can declare it up here and in my constructor, and that's the last place I can do it, but I can actually declare my local variable down here, and I can now do new location, and I can pass in two pieces of information. So I can go ahead and pass in Phoenix and also AZ. So that fulfills requirements. So this is just declaring that I'm going to create a local variable, a location object when I create a hotel, but I'm going to do it in my hotel constructor. So before I leave constructor, I have to satisfy the need to create this location element. I can't do it anywhere else. It has to either be done when I declare the object variable up in my instance area or within the constructor. I cannot wait any longer than that piece of information. So that's one type of class hierarchy that when I create a constructor here, I have to fulfill it. And you have to fulfill it in one of two places. I either have to fulfill it when I declare it up at the class level, or by the time the constructor finishes. And in this case, I declare it up here at a class level, but I actually populate the piece of information in my constructor. But before I leave this last curly brace, I have to populate that. Now there's one other constructor that's going to create some problems. If I come over here to room and I go ahead and create my constructor in that environment, remember I made a child relationship and is a relationship with this. So guest and conference are now children of room. So as soon as I make a constructor for my room type here, and I'm going to make all of those there, I now have a problem that when I save this, I'm going to break my guest and my conference because as soon as I make a guest class, it's also going to make its superclass or its parent class a room. And to make a room, I need to give it three pieces of information. Same thing with conference. When I make a constructor here, I'm going to make an instance of constructor, but as part of that, I'm going to make an instance of room, and I can't make it without those three pieces of information. So I'm going to delete my constructor for guest, and I'm going to delete my constructor for my conference, and I'm going to remake it now that I have that hierarchy in place and a constructor created in my room. So when I come down here to source, and I generate my constructor, now notice that I'm saying I need to also pass three pieces of information up to the constructor for room, as well as collect two pieces of information for my local class or my child class. When I generate that, I now have a constructor. I'm going to move this up, so put it where it belongs. That takes a bunch of information. Some of that information is going to get passed to the super or the parent. Some is going to be consumed here at the child class level, and that goes ahead and fixes my conference one. Same thing with my constructor for my guest. I'm going to go ahead and do source, generate constructor with my fields. I'm going to use the room constructor of those three pieces plus my local variables, and I'm going to go ahead and get that created. And now I've got a constructor for guests that takes three pieces of information that needs to go to the parent or the super, and two pieces of information that I'm going to consume at a local level. So when you have a parent-child relationship and you start creating objects, when I create objects of the children, it also creates objects of its parent. If the parent has specific requirements for what it needs to create that object, you need to fulfill that at the child level and then pass it up to the parent or the super level using the super method that you see present right here on the screen right now. Both guest and conference has that super piece where pieces of information need to get passed up to it. So now we have fulfilled our constructor requirement for our guest that is a child of room. We fulfilled the requirements of our conference, which is a child of room. And over in location, if you remember, we went ahead and declared a constructor for our location object, and we populated that in the constructor. So you don't always have to populate it when you declare it up here in the instance level, but before you leave the constructor, you do have to meet the requirements for that particular constructor of location. Thank you.